It's tip time. That's right. Cut down on the amount of time you spend in the kitchen. And here with a couple shortcuts is Judy Strauss from The Charmed Kitchen. I love that name, The Charmed Kitchen. So we're talking about some charming things here, like this crazy looking squash here, huh?
The Hubbard squash. It was so fun how many people come up to me and ask, what is that? It's a Hubbard squash.
Okay, but first I want to ask you about this before it puts my eye out. What we got?
It won't put your eye. Well,
we got popcorn over here in the pan here. What's going on?
This is a great tip when you're heating up oil and you want to know when your oil hits 350 degrees, because popcorn pops at 350. Ah. So if you just put a kernel or two in, when your oil hits 350, there we go. It is. Right on schedule.
That is pretty good, huh?
I had dreams about this working.
And it worked. I got to tell you something. It's such a great idea because some people you look at it when it starts to ripple. It is starting to ripple a tiny bit.
But it started to ripple at 340.
Yeah, right. So you don't quit. Bingo, bango. Hey,
there we go.
That is great. And I got to tell you, or you get it too hot and start smoking and you burn the oil and you ruin the flavor.
Right. And this way you know when it's 350. You want to put them in right when you first start to heat them up so that they start to warm up with the oil. And there are devices. You can get little things, thermometer things.
So don't heat up the pan, then throw it in there.
No,
just
put it in right in the beginning, and when it hits 350 degrees, they pop. You saw they didn't go anywhere. We didn't take your eye out.
I love that.
And now I know that pan's 350 degrees.
Another question about this thing, like when you cook 350 degrees, what kind of things do you cook 350 degrees? And should you start it on medium or you start it on high? Or
well, you know, it depends, but most times when you're searing food, whether you're doing a chicken breast or even sauteing onions, 350 is often a good place to start. And I know with a lot of like pastries like donuts and stuff, usually you're starting 350, 360. And a lot, even fish.
And probably medium heat, because if you put it on too high, it's going to race past there, right?
It's going to go past, and of course, once you put the food in, it's going to bring the temperature down a little bit. But the idea here is you don't want to put it in when it's cold.
Yeah.
You know, you think it's hot, it seems like it's plenty of time to you, you put it in there.
Soaks up the grease.
It soaks up the grease and sits there and it sticks and does all kinds of awful things.
How about my old pal, Mr. Hubbard here?
Mr. Hubbard, we wanted to talk about a little bit of safety. It's winter squash season and you wouldn't think they're unsafe. And generally, unless someone throws one at your head, they're not unsafe. But there are some things to make them easier to cut up.
Knife slip. You could slip a knife on this.
That's the problem. Yeah. Because they're like this. They're roly-poly. There's a few things you can do with a smaller squash, like an acorn squash. You can just put it on a towel. That's going to stabilize it somewhat, a bigger towel than that. A lot of times, the easiest thing you can do with something like a butternut is just slice off one end a little bit. I like to use a serrated knife for this.
Saw it. You saw it off.
Saw it off.
Right. Now it's not going to roll.
No, not so wobbly now.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And now it's a lot easier to cut off, you know, cut in half. And for the stem part, you know, you're not going to use the tip of your knife to try to pry it off.
No.
You'll break your knife. You can try to use the back of a knife and you know, knock it off that way. You can also use a hammer.
Can I saw it off?
You can saw it off. Oh yes, of course you're a guy, you want to saw it off. Or you can just take your knife and just cut a little bit of squash with it.
Bingo.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
And then cut this in half and you're good
but
to go.
But these are tricky and hard, and sometimes the knife, it'll guide the knife towards your hand.
Yeah. And this way, just having that little bit of a cut makes it easier. Now the Hubbard, of all the winter squashes, you know, they're sometimes called the hard squashes. That's the hardest one of all. My sister's tip, and you know, she just goes on her deck and throws it to the driveway below. Yeah, throws it.
So when this thing busts open, what do you do with it to cook it?
Oh, you know, it's one of my favorites. The flesh is really, really, really dark orange, darker than the butternut, sweeter than pie pumpkins. Oh. Anything you would use a winter squash with.
So like nature really protected that sweetness
really
with a crazy hard shell, right?
And another friend of mine says when she throws hers off, to smash it, she puts it in a garbage bag first. Ah. Good thought, so it's not quite as messy.
It's a smart thing.
Yeah.
What's going on with your garlic in the cage here?
This is a couple different ways. If you have to peel garlic, it's always annoying to have to peel a bunch of garlic. And I actually started shaking it and it was working. You can just put your unpeeled garlic in a jar and shake it up and it'll peel it. It's a little, I think it's a little more efficient to do it in 2 bowls. Yeah. And put them together and shake them up. It's really noisy.
I like it.
But I mean, you can see, I was playing around this morning, and you can see that the garlic.
Right. Regan and I
didn't peel any.
We were talking about Jacques Pepin a little while ago, and we were talking about some of the tips he gives. And I see you use a tip that I learned from him. You cut the root off.
Cut the root off.
You cut the root off, the paper comes right off when you shake it. Yeah. If you leave the root on, it'll still stick to it a little bit.
And I find, too, when I get local garlic that's really, really fresh, if it's too wet, it doesn't necessarily do it either. Another tip I wanted to talk about, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, if you are cutting up juicy fruits like pineapple and melons, if you put your cutting board inside a baking sheet, the juices don't get all over the counter. They don't go everywhere.
There you go. It's a perfect idea.
Perfect idea.
Okay, and if you want to learn the tip also about how to clean out the blender, we go to the website, right?
Yes, you have it. I send it to you. You're going to have the link with all kinds of tips to keep your houseplants alive all winter long, and of course recipes.
The Charm Kitchen.
Yes.
What's the website?
Thecharmkitchen.com.
How about that?